The New York Mets have made their first wave of roster cuts as position battles are starting to form in spring training. We'll break down all the latest on today's edition of Locked On Mets.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers who join today will get $150 in bonus bets. Your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Now, the New York Mets have 22 more spring training games, and 3 weeks from Monday, they will play their final one against the New York Yankees, which just shows you how close we're getting to the start of the regular season. Camp is about halfway done, and a big milestone happened on Sunday. We got to the first bit of roster cuts. This is always the time where you're going to see those top prospects who shine early in camp get sent on over to the minor league side. So no more cameos from Kevin Parada, Drew Gilbert, Jet Williams, or Luis Angel Acuna. They've all been optioned to the minor league side of things. You also have Christian Scott and Mike Vasil that were sent to the minor league side. Each of them got an inning on Saturday, so we got to see Scott and Vasil in a game. They both impressed, but they are, of course, not going to break camp with the team, which isn't a shock. I think at the beginning of camp, when things open, the only two out of that six you would have thought had a shot was Scott or Vasil if the Mets were just ravaged by injuries in that rotation. But they still have a lot of viable MLB starters in camp, and so the chances of those guys actually breaking just weren't great. Not to mention, David Stern sort of set expectations with that early on when he said of Scott and Vasil, guys that we've identified that still need some time to develop, we likely aren't going to alter that due to our MLB roster. So no surprises there. You also saw as the other cuts, Eric Orrs, Cam Robinson, Danny Young, and Colton Ingram. Those four conceivably could have won a spot in the opening day bullpen. They've all been optioned down to the minor league side. Now, Dominic Hamill was not part of this first wave of cuts, although I wouldn't read too much into that because the cuts happened on Sunday and he got into a game on Sunday. So I think that was just a matter of letting him pitch once in the Grapefruit League. He's probably going to join Scott and Vasil in the minor league camp at some point this week. Now, the non-roster arms that did survive the first wave of cuts are notable. So you have Austin Adams, Nate Lavender, Yaxel Rios, Chad Smith, and Cole Sulser. Kyle Crick also has not been optioned yet. I will say that at the beginning of camp, David Stern said that Kyle Crick showed up with an injury. So that's probably more a matter of just semantics of where he's at with the injury rather than him still vying for a spot in the opening day bullpen. That's not going to happen. But Nate Lavender is the name that everyone wants to talk about right now because he has been an early star of camp. 2 scoreless appearances up to this point, 4 strikeouts, no walks or hits allowed. A guy that has numbers that pop off the page in the minor leagues when it comes to his strikeouts. A 92-mile-per-hour fastball that he throws with intention and will behind it. A guy that has, really garnered a lot of attention, and hopefully he can make this team. That'd be a really great story. And surviving the first cuts was a big step. He did get a lot of time in AAA last year, so he is someone that is certainly in the mix this year, and I imagine will be up with the Mets at some point. It's just a matter of if that happens right now, and they want to add him to the 40, or if it's a little bit later down the line. Austin Adams also 2 scoreless innings so far, 1 hit allowed, no walks, 3 strikeouts. Cole Sulser, 3 scoreless innings, no walks, 1 hit, 4 strikeouts. And Yaxel Rios, 2 scoreless innings, 1 hit, 1 walk, 1 strikeout. Chad Smith has yet to appear in a game. If these guys survive more of these cuts, it starts to become even more of a story as viable options who could break camp in that bullpen. Moving over to the backstops, obviously I mentioned Kevin Parada was sent to the minor league camp. Hayden Senger has not joined him yet. top defensive catcher in this system. Conceivably could break camp. I would say it's unlikely, but he's going to hang around for a little bit more. Austin Allen and Tomas Nido are certainly options the Mets have if they were to find a suitor for Omar Narvaez in a trade. That could be the backup catcher come opening day. Narvaez right now set to, of course, make the team. But if some club out there has an injury to their starting catcher and they need somebody to fill in for the first couple months of the season, then the Mets fill in a ring on Narvaez and they could move him, maybe get something of value back, and that would clear the spot for Tomas Nido to ultimately be on the opening day roster. Infield is an interesting position right now for the Mets because this is where they're having some injuries. Now, they aren't serious, but both Jeff McNeil and Joey Wendell are dealing with soreness. For McNeil, it is his left bicep. Very concerning because he has a partial tail. Geez. If he had a partial tail, we'd be really concerned. Now, he has a partial tear in his UCL in his left arm. Didn't require Tommy John surgery, but the fact that there's some soreness in his bicep, I would raise a red flag to that. The Mets are trying to downplay it. It's day-to-day. They'll decide on Tuesday if it needs an MRI, but right now they're not putting him through an MRI tube yet because they don't feel the injury is serious enough to require one. But it's definitely something to watch. You can't just ignore it. If it's the same arm that there is that issue in his elbow and it's a bicep, yeah, I'd be pretty. If I put my concern level on 1 to 10 right now, it might be above a 4. I might be a little worried about that one because if they lose Jeff McNeil, this infield really craters, honestly. Really just the team in general because of the depth that he provides in the outfield too. So we'll see. Hopefully it's nothing. And right now the Mets are making it seem like it is nothing. Joey Wendell, it is shoulder soreness. So again, they're not too concerned. But if either of these guys starts the season on the IL, well, there is some room for an infielder, which brings us to the non-roster infielders that are still in camp. You got Rylan Bannon, Jose Iglesias, and Yolmer Sanchez. Both Iglesias and Sanchez are 2 for 12 so far with the bat. They're not really known for their bats, so I would be surprised if they made the team, especially over Zach Short. We're going to talk about more in the next segment. Bannon, though, pretty good camp so far. He's 3 for 10 with 2 doubles. I spoke about him at length in the non-roster invites, getting to know them before camp. I did a whole podcast on these guys, and Bannon was a name I circled. So the fact that he's hitting the ball hard, can play some third, can play some second, he's a name to watch. He could win a job in camp. I would say the two right now that I'm looking at is Bannon and Trace Thompson. We'll talk about in a minute here. But first, DH, Luke Voit, G-Man Choi, still hanging around. I imagine they will hang around until final cuts just because of their MLB experience, but hasn't been a great camp for either of them. Choi a little bit better because he did homer. He's 2 for 11. He's walked a couple times. Luke Voigt's 1 for 15 with 5 strikeouts. So not looking good for Voit to find his way on the roster. Outfielders, I mentioned Thompson. He's 4 for 8 with 2 home runs and a double. He had a good run of success with the Dodgers in 2022. That is not that long ago. He has had, throughout the major leagues, a couple of nice stints with the Dodgers. I believe he even had one decent one with the White Sox, but don't quote me on that one. Overall, though, I could see Thompson making this team. And he's got to put it together for a couple more weeks, and other things have to break his way. But there's a world where the Mets go with Trace Thompson over DJ Stewart on opening day. DJ Stewart's 2 for 13 right now, no walks, 4 strikeouts. Thompson would give him another guy that could actually play in the outfield, would give them more athleticism on the team. And if he's just swinging the bat better, Stewart does have an option. So that's definitely a storyline to follow. Outside of Thompson, you have Ben Gamble and Taylor Cowley. Taylor Cowley is 2 for 10, and Gamble's 3 for 11. So we'll be monitoring those guys. And as I mentioned, Alex Ramirez hung around. He's 4 for 10 in camp with a double. He is on the 40-man roster. But I have 5 major questions that the Mets are going to have to answer over the next 3 weeks as position battles continue to form, and they have to figure out who's going to break camp for opening day. So we're going to go through those 5 questions in the next segment. First, though, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Get buckets with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. It's $150 if your bet wins. You can bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same game parlays, exclusive props, and more. Right now, we got MLB futures. So if you want to lay down some money on the Mets to make the playoffs, for them to hit their over on wins, which is 81.5. You want to bet on Pete Alonso to win the MVP or Francisco Lindor to win the MVP, or maybe you just want to bet on a completely different team. Maybe it's not wise to wager any money on the Mets right now. Arizona Diamondbacks, like plus 4,000 to win the World Series. They were in the World Series last year, weren't they? And they got better this offseason. A lot of ways that you can play over at FanDuel. And again, before you place any MLB futures, place a $5 bet on an NBA game or anything else going on right now. If you win that money line bet, you're going to get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Now, I have 5 questions the New York Mets have to answer before opening day. And we begin with the obvious one, which is the question that teams are always asking throughout spring training and throughout the season. That's who's healthy. That is always number one when trying to decide your roster. And we already know the Kodai Senga news. Max Kranick went down as well. I'll talk about him a little bit more in the next segment. So I'm going to do a full segment breaking down where the starting rotation is at this stage of camp. But as I alluded to in the last segment, Joey Wendell and Jeff McNeil. This could definitely impact the roster. If they are short one of these guys, they're going to have to find someone to fill that void. And to me, that means that Zach Short has a pretty good chance to make this team. Because if either of those guys aren't good to go, Zach Short is the natural fit to be on the opening day roster. He's on the 40 already. He does not have any options. So if the Mets want to keep him, they'll have to pass him through waivers if he doesn't make the team. And he's one of those guys that can sort of fill in all over the place. He can play pretty much any position. He does hit the ball pretty hard at times. He has 2 well-struck doubles over the last couple of games. In the past, hasn't had the best major league success, but has hung around an MLB roster the last couple of years. So if you had to weight odds here on who is the best bet to make this opening day roster when it comes to these other infielders, Zach Short has a leg up over Rylan Bannon and Jose Iglesias and Yolmer Sanchez just by virtue of being on the 40 and the fact that he's been on MLB teams a little bit more over the last couple of years. The next question I have that the Mets have to answer, do they have enough thump in their lineup? Pete Alonso, Francisco Lindor, Francisco Alvarez, those are your 3 home run hitters, I would say right now. Brandon Nimmo deserves an honorable mention in that based on the season he just had. But they are missing that middle of the order pop, and we've talked about it throughout the offseason. They're expecting or they're hoping to get some from Brett Beatty and Mark Vientos, but who else can you add to this roster that gives you that? Maybe it is Trayce Thompson. He's at least shown some power early in camp. DJ Stewart was supposed to be that guy. Hasn't fared well too early in camp, but that's early. We're not going to overreact to it. He's certainly the leader in the clubhouse based on what he did last year and having, a guaranteed MLB salary, but he also has an option. So the Mets can option him down. Maybe it is Luke Voigt or G-Man Choi. Like I said, it could be Trayce Thompson. Maybe it's Rylan Bannon. But I do think that one of these roster spots, the Mets are going to want to have somebody that can put a charge into a baseball. And that also leads me to tomorrow's show where I'm going to discuss the Scott Boras clients that are left because they're selling at discount prices right now. And if there's still any hope on JD Martinez or Jordan Montgomery, that's going to be tomorrow's show. And as camp continues, the noise could get louder when it comes to JD Martinez, particularly when it comes to what Brett Beatty and Mark Vientos are doing. And that leads me to question 3. How long of a leash do Beatty and Vientos have here? Are they just guaranteed spots in that opening day lineup? Is this a bridge year of sorts where you have to figure out what you have in those guys? And regardless of how well or poorly they perform, they're going to get the early opportunities to be on the big league roster and get at bats. It's not a bad strategy. I get why the Mets might do that. But I'm just curious. If the numbers are terrible throughout camp, how do the Mets process it? Brett Beatty is 2 for 16 so far in camp with 5 strikeouts. He has hit a home run. If Brett Beatty ends up 2 for 32, is he just your starting third baseman on opening day? Or do you send him to Syracuse to work on his game, work on his swing, and make him earn it? And if you do that, who's your starting third baseman? Is it Mark Vientos? Or are we in a situation where Joey Wendell's starting at third base for the New York Mets? This is where it can get kind of scary if these two guys can't figure it out. I'm not going to overreact to the first 2 weeks of spring training, but it is a question that has to be prominent on the Mets' minds. And these guys are getting a lot of at-bats early. I think there's some reason behind that. And they should be in the lineup in all of these games, honestly. See this is the time, right? Get them as many reps as possible and see what they can do. Because right now, yeah, on opening day, if you were to write out the lineup for that first game right now, it's going to have Vientos at DH and it's going to have Beatty at third base. But if they have a terrible spring, I just don't know how you can justify awarding both of them those spots other than, hey, it's not the Mets year. This is a bridge year. Only reason you could do that. And again, it brings me back to that JD Martinez conversation we'll have on tomorrow's show. Now, question number 4. Who's in the bullpen? And that's always something that you're watching throughout spring training. Edwin Diaz, Adam Ottavino, Brooks Raley, Jake Diekman, Drew Smith, and Jorge Lopez. You'd figure all 6 of them are in that bullpen. I would say there is an off chance, but a chance if either Drew Smith or Jorge Lopez has a terrible camp. Maybe they try to pass them through waivers. Unlikely, but I'm just putting those names out there. There's also, of course, injury that can happen to any of those 6 names. And if it does, that would open up another spot. But it's just interesting because you have so many different guys who are vying for a spot. Like we already spoke about Nate Lavender in the last segment. But there's not a lot of spots to be had with the signs the Mets made. Shintaro Fujinami, I've yet to even mention. The only reason why I didn't include him in that list of those first 6 is the fact that the Mets could option him to the minor leagues without losing him based on the contract he signed. Still, I'd imagine they want Fuji with the big league club. If the Mets decide to carry a 6th starter, let's say they want Jose Budo or Joey Lucchesi for depth, all of a sudden, guess what? You're looking at that bullpen, it's full. You're carrying the long man, you carry Fuji, those other 6 names. There is no spot for anyone to win a job. So that's something to monitor, of course. When it comes to the names for the bullpen, Phil Bickford, Sean Reed-Foley, and Johan Ramirez, none of them have options. So in some respects, they have a leg up, but that doesn't mean anything really when it comes to the roster churn at bullpen because they're going to have a lot of guys that they're going to try to pass through waivers throughout the season. So passing any or all of them right now, there's nothing new there. Also, Michael Tonkin is on a split contract. I'd say he probably has the edge. Like right now, if I had to construct an 8-man bullpen, it's the 6 names I mentioned. It's Fujinami and it's Tonkin. But we'll see how camp progresses. Grant Hartwig and Josh Walker are both on the 40-man roster, but have plenty of options. So I'd imagine that they'd have to really stand out in camp to win a job. Reed Garrett is another one. He's got one option and is on the 40. So we'll see how the bullpen mix ultimately shakes out by opening day. Question 5 is what we'll answer in the final segment today. That is, how good or maybe how bad will this starting rotation be this year? We're going to go through the early returns in spring training, where this rotation stands, and if they have enough, or should they make a move? We'll go through that a little more in the next segment. First, though, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you, and is the place to go right now for your spring training tickets. Looking at the app for tomorrow's game on Tuesday. Right now, Yankees at Mets, Clover Park, of course, little, you call it a Subway Series when it's played in Florida? I guess not. But what do you call that? A Turnpike Series? Regardless, $47. A little bit pricey if you want to go to that game. I'd recommend maybe Wednesday you go Mets at Astros. That's $27. Or Thursday, the lowest price ticket for Nationals at Mets. So again, if you're trying to go to the Mets facility at Clover Park, maybe Thursday, a little bit cheaper tickets. But regardless, Game Time is where you go for last-minute tickets. Those prices can drop closer and closer to first pitch. It's the only ticket app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase, where you can see the view of your seats before you buy, so exactly what to expect when you arrive, and all-in prices to show your total up front. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Down the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, Redeem the code Locked On for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, so where are the New York Mets when it comes to their starting rotation at this time? You could say they're set. They got their 5 guys. They got Luis Severino, Jose Quintana, Sean Manaea, Adrian Hauser, and Tyler McGill. But that's not a 5-man rotation that inspires a ton of confidence, particularly if you want to stretch that out to a 6-man rotation. And then there's the Jose Budo, Joey Lucchesi battle, I guess, for that final spot. It's going to be very interesting to see if the Mets hold off any temptation from signing Jordan Montgomery. Again, we'll talk about that on tomorrow's show, but the longer he's out there, the more that dialogue has to be going on in that front office, because this rotation on paper is not great. Can it come together? Absolutely. And Luis Severino did a really nice job making a first impression. On Friday, made his first start, 2 scoreless innings, had a strikeout. That was the final batter he faced, Matt Carpenter. And to get that strikeout, he reared back and threw 198 miles per hour. So that's really good to see. But it's the first of many Grapefruit League starts. We got to see how he continues to look, especially as the lineups get better and better and less rusty throughout spring. Does he still pop off the page? For now, he's their best chance at a frontline starter early in the season. And when a guy's coming off a year with an ERA that was well north of 6, that's just not the best place to be. Now, Jose Quintana, he made his first start on Thursday, looked rusty, gave up 2 runs on a couple of hits, walked 3. So the 3 walks concerned me. But Quintana's a pro's pro. I think he'll ultimately round into form. I just don't know what form is as far as the ceiling of what rounding into the form looks like. In 2022, he pitched like a number 2. Last year, he pitched more like a number 3, I guess, but probably not a high-end one. I think Jose Quintana on a good team is a 4th starter. And you can pretty much say that about every single arm that's in this rotation, if not a 5th starter. So that's where you look at this group, and it's hard to get too excited on opening day. But they have 5 guys to run out there, which I guess at this stage in spring training is better than nothing when it comes to at least the health side of things. Sean Manaea, he made his first start on Saturday, gave up 7 hits in 2 2/3 innings pitched, struck out 3, allowed 3 runs, did get up to 56 pitches. 41 of those were strikes. So I'm encouraged by that. And even more encouraging, he cut the hair. Showed up on Sunday without those luscious locks that he grew for 4 years. Showed up clean shaven as well, looking like a new man. Do you remember the last time a starting pitcher on the New York Mets surprisingly cut his hair? Of course, I'm talking about Jacob deGrom. Cut his hair in 2017, the end of that season. What happened in 2018? He won the Cy Young. That's not going to happen for Sean Manaea, but could this haircut help him to be a solid number 3 starter? I hope so. You got to think it's a little bit easier to pitch with all that hair behind you. I mean, his hair, even longer than whatever Jacob deGrom used to have back in the day. It looked like some heavy, heavy hair from Manaea. So now maybe throws a even harder. We'll see what happens. But I do feel pretty confident that he's going to at least give the Mets some pretty decent innings throughout this year. I just don't know if he's going to hit that ceiling that I think the Mets front office is hoping for, where he could be a high-end 3, because whatever he showed down the stretch last year proves to be the real thing moving forward. And he's got some dominant baseball in him. I think he's probably a nice back-end starter. Speaking of back-end starters, Adrian Hauser got knocked around on Sunday. Gave up 4 hits. 3 of them were doubles. Definitely got hit pretty hard. 3 earned runs, although the last one came in on a home run right after he got pulled for Joshua Cornielli. But regardless, he's made his first couple outings. His pitch count's good. At least these guys are healthy right now. That brings us to the standout of camp when it comes to the starting rotation, Tyler McGill. 5 innings pitched, 4 hits allowed, 1 earned run. Here's the big thing for me. No walks in those 5 innings, 7 strikeouts. Last year, he had a pretty good camp, a 3.71 ERA, but he had 13 walks to 12 strikeouts. So that was pretty telling of the year he would end up putting forth. The fact that he's attacking the strike zone, not walking anyone, getting his strikeouts early on, that's the one really encouraging sign for me. If Tyler McGill can pitch out of his mind for the first month, that's going to help the Mets deal with that loss of Kodai Senga. And maybe he can settle in and have a breakout year for the Mets. I think looking at this rotation right now, I can't believe I'm saying it, but the two guys I'm most encouraged in, I think it's Severino and McGill. And I don't know if I would have said that 6 weeks ago. I don't know. Jose Budo made one start, pitched 2 scoreless innings. Then he had a scoreless inning of relief. So a good camp for him so far. 4 hits allowed, no walks, 3 strikeouts. Joe Lucchesi has yet to appear in a game. Now, I also mentioned Max Kranick being hurt in the last segment. He has a grade 2 hamstring strain, so you're not going to see him for a little bit. Honestly, in some respects, helps him to stay on the Mets roster because now he's going to be on the IL. Another guy that doesn't have any options. I don't know if he was going to make the team as a starting pitcher, but he was an option that the Mets no longer have. So you're down Kranick, you're down Senga. Right now, you're looking at 7 starters when it comes to their depth chart. You got the 5 we've been discussing, and you got Budo and Lucchesi trying to fight for a spot right now. That could be enough. You obviously have some top prospects that are close, but I don't think the Mets want to call on Christian Scott, Mike Vassell, or Dominic Campbell in April or May. I think they want to take their time with those guys, in which case they will still keep their eye on free agency. And according to reports, they were second on Julio Teheran. So they really were trying to get in the mix on signing Teheran to a minor league deal. He signed with the Orioles, ends up choosing Baltimore, looked pretty good in his first outing with them. But the fact that the Mets were interested and were second place, so to speak, on signing to a minor league deal, I think it shows where they're at. They're probably still looking more at guys that can fight at the back end of this rotation because they probably have faith in Hauser and McGill. And, of course, the big acquisitions they made this offseason, if you can call it that, of Severino and Minaya. They are having some trust right now that all these different pieces they put together are somehow going to get the job done early in the season. But you still have Mike Clevenger in free agency. You still have Jordan Montgomery. I know there's some commenters on YouTube, and I've seen it on social media, on Twitter as well, who would want me to mention Trevor Bauer. I just think that he's not going to get signed by anybody. That's why I haven't discussed it. But yeah, conceivably, you could throw an offer towards him. We'll see. We'll see if the Mets make another signing here, but I think they're definitely keeping tabs on that market because as soon as we get the, Jose Quintana has shoulder soreness or whatever it is, and now you're really staring down the barrel of a Hauser, McGill, Budo, all 3 being in your opening day rotation, I think that's where the Mets might jump. But also, I just wonder, as Montgomery hangs out there, as Matt Chapman and Cody Bellinger signed for far less than we expected, at some point do the Mets actually try to open up a dialogue with Scott Boras and land a long-term number 2 or number 3 starter in the rotation at a cost that is palatable? You got to think about it, and that's what tomorrow's show is going to be about, assuming Montgomery doesn't sign before then. We'll talk about what's going on with Scott Boras' clients and if the Mets can get into the mix. So if you don't want to miss out on that episode, make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. If you're listening on the audio side, if you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. We're getting very close to our goal of 8,000 subs by opening day. So I appreciate all of you who are subscribing. If you want to follow me on Twitter or X, you can do so at Finkelstein Ryan. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider and join our texting service, you can find the link in the episode description. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen or your first watch every day. Now, for your second watch, head over to the first ever 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube that covers everything in the world of sports. Of course, I'm talking about Locked On Sports Today with our local experts from each team and our league-wide experts from each league. You'll find Locked On Sports Today streaming 24/7 on YouTube.